Hello and welcome to the Monroe Mythic Clancast. I am Jason Monroe. This is episode 186. This is going to be a good one. First of all, if you are a new listener, if you have not done this before, could you go and give the podcast a rating? I am looking at the Spotify screen just now. This podcast has 122 5-star ratings. And as I say, on the rare occasion I do ask this every dozen episodes or so, maybe one day we'll break into some chart, maybe one day I'll be suggested to someone who's listening to a similar podcast, and who knows, I might help someone who hasn't found this because they know who I am or came from Instagram or whatever. Okay, so I have been running a thing called the 8-week Rewire. Now, this has probably been one of the best and most fun and most interesting things I have ever done in my 8.5-year-long career in nutrition in the yo-yo diet industry. Not only has every single person who's gone through it and got to the end so far signed up to continue working with me, 2 people for 12 months, 2 for 6, the rest are, one person's on a monthly basis, the rest are quarterly. Which is an insane, I would call that like a conversion rate, right? When I do the 30-day trial stuff, it's kind of so-so. Most people drop off, some people continue. That's all changing with the new 30-day kickstart though. But anyway, we're not talking about that. What I want to talk about is, at the end of the 8-week Rewire, when they do their final check-in at the end of the 8 weeks, I ask a few very specific questions. And one of them is kind of around, well, one of them's asking if they think that our work's just starting or if we're going to continue working together. Do they have any fears about, now that we're at the end of the 8 weeks, is there anything that you're anxious about or worrying about or thinking about? And if we do continue working together, what's going to be the top 3 things that we go to work on? Now, I want to talk about a very specific thing here because it was such an interesting thing to get into the more that I thought about it, because it came up with everyone. And people were saying, I know from the past, ultimately, I know from the past that old habits creep back in. And multiple people said it, and it got me thinking about something, right? So when we're saying things like this, right, it's usually us trying to shelter ourselves from responsibility to make failure or perceived failure easier to take. So what I mean by that is, we never actually talk about us as doing things. Nobody says, I went back to overeating. They say that the weight crept back on. They don't say that I went back to snacking all day and drinking alcohol and ordering takeaways multiple times per week and eating full-size bars of chocolate. They say old habits crept back in. We talk in a very specific way because it protects us. We try to protect ourselves from the full impact of our choices by making it sound like the things did the thing, right? Or not. I didn't go back to the habits, that the habits crept in. I didn't put the weight back on, the weight crept back on. So something that I do a lot when I'm coaching and doing check-ins with people is reframing things to get them to take more responsibility. Now, it's not about blame or shame as ever with any of that nonsense. We're not pointing fingers, right? We're not blaming anyone for anything. But what we are doing is taking on responsibility. So many people go through life, and this came up quite a few times as well. So many people go through life thinking they are a victim of their weight, that it's something that happened to them, that it's just, they're just one of the unlucky ones and their weight is, they're someone whose weight just goes up. And it's so important to reframe it. And it's not to attack yourself. It's not about you did this to yourself, but it's taking the responsibility and saying, look, my weight is where it is because I choose to live in a way that does this, and this. I stay up to silly o'clock and scroll my phone. I wake up exhausted the next day. The first thing I eat is sugar and caffeine. I snack all day. I don't do any food prep. I'm too tired to go to the supermarket. I don't plan any meals. Like all that stuff, that's all a choice. And the thing is, we don't we don't think of it like that, right? We don't think of it as a conscious choice. We just like, that's just how I live. That's just the way I am. That's just how things are. And it makes it very easy for us to hold on to this idea that it's not us, it's happening to us. So, with the habits thing, right? And this was the thing that came up multiple times, and I had this conversation with everyone about, I'm worried that old habits will creep back in. Now, think, and this is the explanation that I gave to all of them. You can tell I'm very excited about this because it's really interesting, for me at least. But think of it this way. In the past, traditionally, your approach to your weight has been to diet. So you've gone to Slimming World, to Weight Watchers. You've tried fasting. You've tried tracking 1,200 calories. You've tried cutting things out, low carb, etc., right? The list is fucking endless. But the thing is, none of these approaches were things that you were going to do for the rest of your life. You were never going to not eat snacks for the rest of your life. You were never going to cut chocolate out for the rest of your life. You were never going to not eat carbs or follow Slimming World or go to Weight Watchers, count sins, track points, track calories. You don't see a world where you're doing this thing forever. So, and that's what yo-yo dieting is. Remember, yo-yo dieting is not your weight going up and down. Your weight going up and down is a symptom of yo-yo dieting. Yo-yo dieting is when we bounce between different versions of our diet. Here's how I eat Monday to Friday. Here's how I eat Friday to Sunday. Here's how I eat during term time. Here's how I eat during school holidays. Here's how I eat normally. Here's how I eat Christmas. Here's how I eat when I'm dieting, and here's how I eat the rest of the time. That's what yo-yo dieting is. When you start separating the weight that you eat, you start compartmentalizing it. I'm really good during the day, but then it goes tits up at night. Or I'm great Monday to Thursday, and then I go off plan Friday to Sunday. That's yo-yo dieting. Now, when we're talking about old habits creeping back in, let's say you're following Slimming World. Is your plan to follow Slimming World for your entire life? Is your plan to show up to a meeting, to have the fear of someone looking at you on a set of scales make you stay on plan? Are you going to do that for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Probably not. So you don't have a long-term strategy. All you're doing is short-term dieting to get your weight down for a little while. Old habits don't creep back in. You go back to them. So think of it this way. I've always thought of diets as holidays. I used to say this about Herbalife coaches when they were a thing. Herbalife coaches were diet travel agents. They take you on a holiday for a little while, but what's the massive downside of a holiday? The holiday has to end. You always have to come home. So I always thought of Herbalife consultants as travel agents, diet travel agents. They give you shakes, right? And this is the thing. Any diet, there's no magic diets. None of them are special. None of them are doing anything. All they do, and the way that they work, it's not because shakes make you lose weight. It's not because Slimming World makes you lose weight. It's not because cutting carbs makes you lose weight. It's what is it stopping you from doing. Remember what the problem was. The problem was that you are someone who eats in a way that leads to weight gain. If you want to lose weight, the way to solve that problem is to stop eating like that. But people don't do that. People don't work on their eating habits. They don't say, right, let's take a look at what I'm doing and fix it. Instead, they say, give me something to follow. I need a plan. I need rules. I need restrictions. I need someone to tell me what to do. So instead of solving the problem, they ignore the problem. They push it to the side. And then they go on their diet holiday and they follow the plan and they drink the shakes and they count the calories and they count the sins and the points and whatever they're doing. And then they lose some weight and time goes on and they start to get bored. They don't want to do this thing anymore. I've had enough. I'm tired of this. I'm fed up. I'm fed up eating like this. Now, you can't go from that to just not eating anymore. So what happens when you no longer want to do that thing? You go back to normal. So old habits don't creep back in. You just never did anything about them. They didn't go anywhere. They never went away. You just managed to bottle them up and push them down for a bit while you followed this other thing. And this is the fear that the people that I've been working with for these 8 weeks had when I was doing their check-ins this week. I'm worried that old habits will creep back in. And the conversation I had was, look, old habits don't creep back in. You go back to them. But you go back to them because you end up in limbo. You've been doing something that's been helping you lose weight, but you've had enough of it. You don't want to do it anymore, but you don't have anything else. There's no midpoint. So the only thing left is for you is to go back to the path of least resistance, the things that you've been doing for months and years, the stuff that's familiar, easy, comfortable, effortless. Yes, it leads to your weight going up, and you don't really want that to happen, but you also don't want to follow this plan anymore. Old habits don't creep back in. They just never go away. It's just another term for yo-yo dieting. They're not creeping back in. You're just going back to the other half of the yo-yo. So, again, the chat that I had with these guys was, look, I've reinforced this over the last 8 weeks. We've spoke about it constantly. You are not following a plan. You're not just here doing something for a little while. We have deconstructed every part of you that led you to a weight that you didn't want to be. We have broken it all down, and we've laid it out bare. You can't hide from it anymore, and we've worked on it. If you wanted to go back to your old habits, you would. They won't creep back in. It's going to be a conscious choice. And it's just a really helpful way to look at it, where we let go of this idea that we're some helpless, precious flower that will just blow down the minute we don't have any support. So, next time you find yourself worrying about old habits creeping back in, just stop and ask yourself the question, have I actually done anything about these old habits? Did I take the time to understand them? Did I take the time to understand my coping habits? Why do I reach for chocolate when I feel stressed? Why do I go and get sugar when I'm tired? Why do I stay up to silly o'clock scrolling my phone when I know I'm not getting enough sleep? Why do I do these things? Or did you just look for something to replace them for a little while? Because this is why you yo-yo diet. This is why you struggle with your weight. You have never turned round, taken a look at the past, taken a look at yourself, and stood your fucking ground and looked at your habits and says, right, what the fuck is this all about? Why am I doing all of this stuff? Nobody does that. Nobody, because it's uncomfortable. It's horrible. Nobody wants to admit, and I've done some really uncomfortable work with people over the last few weeks. I've got people who have identified that they've got alcohol issues. There are people who have identified, we've got to a point where it's like, look, I don't think it's a diet you need. I think it's, not in so many words, right? But I think it's therapy that you need. Sometimes people have things going on in their life that they feel like they're out of control around, or they feel helpless around, and they look to exert control elsewhere, and it's like, fuck it, I'll just go on a diet. Because they're looking to find control. They need something to focus on and control and distract them, and your weight's quite an easy thing to help with that. And I've worked with people over the last few weeks who we've identified could potentially, I don't diagnose people, but could potentially have an eating disorder, where I've had to say, I think we should stop the work that we're doing, and I would like you to go to your GP, and I want you, and I'll tell them what to say, right? I'll be like, look, see all this stuff that you said to me here, I want you to take that part, and I want to go to your GP and tell them these things. And you'll be probably referred on, first of all, for talking therapy, so that's usually CBT, then the CBT counsellor, or you might even just get sent for disorder assessment, but usually I think it's like CBT counselling is like the start point before it goes beyond that. But yeah, we are creatures of comfort. We don't like to face up to things. We like to shy away from things. We like the path of least resistance. We like things that are easy. Following a diet, following plans, following rules is easier than trying to fix that thing that you've been doing for the last 20 years. to identify that trauma that led you to start emotional eating when you were 18 years old, when your mum and dad separated and your world crumbled down, or like something like that. We're not born with eating habits, right? We're not born with an emotional connection to food. We're not born with coping mechanisms. We develop them. Do you know, I've been listening to a book. I've left my phone in the house. I've been listening to a book recently, and it's got nothing to do with nutrition. It's a complete sci-fi book about AI and this AI system. And this AI system is created a way of coping, and I can't remember the word. That's annoying, but it's a word, and it's the fracturing of one's self, breaking the self up into pieces, in an attempt to be able to cope with the difficulties of life, where we break ourselves up into little pieces so that we can get through the day, and we create all these little compensatory behaviours so that, rather than actually tackle and deal with the thing and find an appropriate outlet for it, we just find something that helps us get through, like playing games on your phone or scrolling social media. The more we do these things, people think they're addicted to this. I can't say actually whether that's a thing or not. I've never actually looked into it. I know food addiction isn't a thing. I know sugar addiction isn't a thing. I don't know about phones and games and things. I would imagine it's very similar to the whole food thing, where it's just a dopamine response, where you're getting something from it. Anyway, the point is, like, the more we do these things, the more we're coping with something. If you're spending an excessive amount of time on your phone, this is the thing. People say, "Oh, I need to get my screen time down." No, you need to find out why your screen time's so high. What is it that you don't want to think about? What's going on in your life right now? What's feeling heavy right now? Where's the stress coming from? Where's the emotions coming from? What are you ignoring? What's going wrong? What's not going well at work? It's not about getting your screen time down. It's about getting whatever the thing is that you're using your screen to cope with down. We look at all the wrong things. Like, I need to get my weight down. No, you need to look at why your weight is where it is. I need to get my steps up. No, you need to look at why you're sitting down so much. We always come at these things from the wrong angles. We focus on the scales to change the number. We focus on our steps to make the number go up. We look at the hours of screen time and how can we bring it down. These numbers are all there for a reason. We need to come at them from the right angles. Anyway, enough of a rant from me. But yeah, it's just so interesting that, people worrying about old habits creeping back in. And that just comes from the people I'm working with having decades-long history of yo-yo dieting. And they know that's always what happens. And explaining, well, look, the reason that always happens is that's all you've got to go back to. And because of the way that we've been doing things in an 8-week rewire, there's nothing to go back to. This is it. We've made the changes. This is how you eat now. This is how we do things. And then the 8-week process obviously helps kind of cement that in so that it is going to be a lasting change. Anyway, enough from me. Until next time.